Okay, yes, it's live. Great. So welcome, Liz Parrish, and welcome everybody who's watching. Now, yes, it's great to have you on the show, and it's amazing what you've been doing with Bioviva there. And I just as an introduction, there's been a lot of media out there recently about what you've been doing. Would you like to just give us an introduction to you, who you are and what motivates you to be interested in gene therapy and starting up a company like Bioviva?
Yeah, so hi, my name's Liz Parrish, and I'm the CEO of Bioviva, and I'm an entrepreneur and a humanitarian. I'm not a scientist. Essentially, I think I'm a scientist at heart, but I'm not a PhD or a medical doctor, so we should get that out of the way. I created this company to find medical cures for biological aging. I initially got into this to find cures to childhood disease and believe that this is the fastest route to do that. I formed a company called Bioviva. It officially formed January this year, and we raised some money, and then we got some private donations outside of the US to go ahead and run a test of what we think is the fastest way to biological age reversal. I partook in that test with medical doctors in a medical clinic. Recently, we've been a bit lambasted out of the water with a really bad interview that had very little information. So they went ahead and put where in the world I lived, and put that I lived in a modest 2-bedroom house, which isn't true, and various other things. And I'm very disappointed about this. They really tried to discredit the science, which essentially blocks it from you. So I'm a little upset about this right now, but I'll get over it because we're picking up our bootstraps and we're carrying on. So I guess I think that was your first question, is how I felt about this media blitz, and I think that it was quite. It was a big swing at really creating new forms of business. Creating a healthcare system that is accessible by people and gives the people what they need and what they want. And, it just goes along with stifling innovation. So, I don't have a problem with safety and efficacy. I have no problem with that. And that's why I stepped up and took this test. These therapies, okay? What I have a problem with is keeping people from access to therapeutics that may save their life. Clearly, the therapeutics that I took should have been given to somebody who is dying today. As a matter of fact, there's over 100,000 people dying today of age-related diseases. One of them should have received that. We had no ability to give that to one of them, so I took it myself to see what would happen, and I don't mind. Okay, so I don't know what will happen to me in 1 day or 12 million years, but I'm kind of okay with that because we study death, and I know that waiting for a cure to come down the pipeline, I would have died anyway. So that's how I feel. I feel a little bit raw today in the shadow of this press that really looked like it was meant to hurt us rather than help us with innovation and making a healthier, better world. We're actually a team of, we're not a one woman team. We are a team of researchers, medical doctors who back the science. We are soundly based in what we're doing. And if people want to ask, they should go to the website, they should look at the science, they should look at how many years of science we've been sitting on, science that arguably maybe isn't patentable, and maybe that's why it's not being used. Maybe it doesn't work, and we're going to find out. I mean, we're using the scientific method to find out if it works. We're trying to get people behind testing it. I'm asking George Church and his group to come up and test my samples and verify if there are any changes. I have a bunch of pre-blood and that we banked and tissue samples. So any of the big groups, if a group wants to come forward from Stanford, Harvard, any place like that, and verify what we're doing, we would love that. If the test fails, then depending on how it fails, it may be because we didn't do enough of the therapy or whatever, and we want to prepare everyone for that. certainly we're excited. You can't have a more excited person. I wake up every day, I look in the mirror, I check my eyes, I check my skin, I check my waistline, I check everything. And so, there's no one more excited than me. I just did tests in the city today. I came over and I did some ultrasound testing on my arteries. I did some blood work to send off, where I'm, willing to give everything is necessary to find out. And, I guess my biggest fear is that it won't be a success and we won't have any outcome. And that would be a big sadness. But I think that it's okay because we started, and let's roll for results. Bad or good, let's roll for some results so that we can start to get these therapeutics online for everyone as soon as possible.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm totally in agreement there. And look, we're not testing on humans. And at what stage will we test on humans? There's already been tests on mice, and
Yes.
this has been kind of hopeful. And I think, according to one study, it increased lifespan, obviously by about 20%. Right?
Oh yeah, yeah. And when I talked to Bill Andrews, he actually said that the outlook for humans would actually be greater than that if it works, just because of the way that mice age and differing from the way humans age. And let's remember that there are products on the market that would have never made it through animal studies, like aspirin and penicillin, okay? So animal studies aren't perfect. And as a matter of fact, at the last SENS conference that I went to, one of the keynote speakers from Oxford, his name is Chaz, he was explicitly talking about how we need to get in the human model. Now, whether people think that it is a great thing to do to test on more youthful, healthier people, that's all up in the air. But we know that our life right now is very limited, so we have to break those limits, and we have to be pioneers to do it. Certainly, I guess that the great thing about me going into this, I have a lot of life extensionists around me, and I want to create the world that they want. But I wasn't the person going in that was afraid of death. I would prefer to live, certainly, but I am more afraid of not achieving something great in my life, in the sense that I want to leave something, if I do have to leave, some data behind or something interesting for the world. And we actually wouldn't have done this if we thought I was going to die. But it's imperative that we change our thinking. When I ask a lot of people about their life and how they look at it, they'd say, oh, I would really get involved with something like that. But then they say something like this: but I have to finish this next series of this TV show or something. The thing is, no, really.
Oh, I have to see the last episode of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, right. I'm busy and really their whole adventure in life is through those shows. And you know what? I'm saying get up and take an adventure. It's there are scary moments, but actually, your risk of mortality driving a car is actually pretty high. Life is a risky thing.
Huge. Yeah.
And actually, if you don't die that way, we know how you're going to die. I know how you're going to die. So, it's kind of like I could have been afraid and said, well, no, I'm going to chicken out and just get old and see how that goes and hope somebody else will take the therapy. Or I could just take it. And it just really seemed like the right thing to do. And I don't want to make this about me, because actually I'm not an interesting person. It's just
I think others disagree, but you certainly are interesting to me and a lot of others, and especially in the the health span extensionist community, and the science community and the transhumanist community. I think that's amazing what you're doing, and you should be applauded for this. And
I don't know.
I think that people need to look at this and see it as something which needs to be done more often. It does take quite a while for therapies to get through the regulatory model. There are different approaches to trying to speed up that approach. For instance, organs on chips. They're building organs on chips, for instance, in order to just test on tissues in outside of an agar plate, outside of a test tube, something that actually mimics the movements and the whole biological conditioning there. And I think that's a good way to do it as well. That doesn't involve humans. Like, for instance, if you want to test drugs on children or how they affect children, you can actually just culture, like get a cell of a child and culture that, and then you won't actually have to test on children who aren't at an age really to make a decision themselves whether they want to be test subjects or not.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I'm really happy to see that I'm really not the only person out there. There are a lot of other people who are doing interesting things. But in what I would say is, especially when it comes to gene therapy, I wouldn't suggest that other people run out and just and go use that. Okay. What I would suggest is that they get their grandparents or somebody else involved in, looking at genetic screening and really pushing forward genetic gene therapies for aging as a disease or the conditions that they have. The great thing about us is what we're doing is we're using gene therapies that should have an effect on biological aging. And as we find more genes, we'll work on more angles. This is so fantastic, because why would we look at biological aging? Well, we would look at that not just to live a super long time, which is fantastic. I think that's great. I hope I do. But we would look at that because what we're finding is you can't cure Alzheimer's and cancer and nephropathies and various other things like this, heart disease, without looking at biological aging. That's why we're getting these symptoms, what I call symptoms of aging. So this is the fantastic thing about what we're doing. And then therein lies, hopefully, life health span extension for everyone, right? Because like what species, gets up and says, well, today's a good day to die. A lot of people, they'll say, oh, it's dying is, of aging diseases is normal. And actually it's not, dying of infectious disease before 35 is what's normal. And then, antibiotics and immunity drugs came along, and it really changed that whole paradigm. And now we die of aging diseases, but this is just something that we can solve. And certainly we don't want to go for quantity anymore. We know what quantity looks like. It's not looking so good. We want to go for quality and quantity. And I think that herein lies the key to that. And so this was a very calculated decision, and a decision that we felt weighed in the favor of me surviving, certainly, because that wouldn't be very good. And so hopefully this will, ring out some good results. But I do see other groups doing some very interesting things in life extension as well, and running other tests. But, as far as advocating, I can't, advocate that people run out and do that, but I can certainly advocate that they send their grandparents and their great-grandparents to do it, who are at such a high risk of mortality.
Yeah, I'd like to see more. Like it seems like the life extensionists and the the transhumanist community don't have enough people in that generation, in the generation around their 70s or 60s, 70s, and 80s. I mean, there are some, but a lot of them about a lot of people in the community seem to be full of vigor and youth. But they're not really the ones who are at most at danger here. And it seems as though the sorts of things you're doing, it can help people in the near term. We're not talking about like 20 years of research here. We're talking about like very soon.
Right,
And
that's
so
what we're hoping to do. Yeah, and we see a lot of people taking even more risks, so we see, the Hollywood set on human growth hormone, and we really don't know the outcome of that. When you put your body into grow and go, other things grow and go as well, and things like cancer and various things like that. And so we see people taking more risks for quality life instead of quantity. And so we just want to get everyone on the quality and quantity life.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've done an interview with many people about this, and it often comes up in interviews that aren't directly related to aging. And people say, oh yeah, well, it's interesting. I'm not sure if I want to live forever. I'm not sure if I want to live for a long time. But you know how much people spend when they're just, at death's door. It's amazing how much money is actually spent at that stage, keeping people alive. Why not try and spend that money now before you actually get to that stage and start suffering at a stage where it's very hard to do anything about it? Why spend all the money then? Why not start focusing on getting in a little bit earlier and try it a bit more interventionist and at an earlier stage?
I agree. We call it, living your legacy instead of leaving it. And that's really important to us. And we're hoping that, persons with a good deal of money who are interested in that want to help the rest of the world do it as well. And so these are expensive technologies, and we're hoping that people will put their money behind them and we can get the cost down. And at that point, it would be a wonderful thing for all people, because if they're looking at selling a product, you can sell a lot more product if it's less expensive. So definitely, we want to get people interested and get all sorts of support. And certainly, something that people could do is, they could contact their legislators, or maybe they could put together a petition or something like that, and really push to expedite medical cures. Things like right to try. Those have been a great success, and that might be some sort of loophole that we can get in eventually. But right now, what we'd like to show is that this works, and that it's a viable option, and then to actually get people who are very sick. So, in the future, we'll be doing more compassionate care scenarios. We want to move forward with Alzheimer's and sarcopenia with these two therapies that I took separate. A therapy per person, and see what sort of results we can get, and then bring those results, really good data, FDA level data, back to the world. But we thought that it was very important to start now rather than later, and to really give this industry a kick in the ass, because it's not enough that billion-dollar companies have gotten behind it. Start producing. Start producing now.
Absolutely. So you mentioned that there were ways to actually get this institutionalized, the right to try, for instance. Is there any other avenues or prospects that actually what we can do now to get this, to get people to legally try these sorts of things in a way that their insurance companies would agree with, for instance?
Yeah, so for one thing, legislation is just way behind technology. So technology is just going so fast right now. We need new laws that expedite therapeutics to people. These are really big questions that take an army of people to solve, and I'm thinking that our group is the group that can solve that. We need manpower. We need people who can work on their off hours towards things like this. We also need to spread out. We need to show the whole world that there's advantages here. And one thing that we really need is the groups like your group and others to not turn people off to an idea. We got to get them with kindness. We got to get them with a good word of their future, because people often aren't. Many of the people in your group are, but people aren't often born thinking that this is a good idea. But once they think about it, they realize that your grandpa has a pig heart valve. That would have been blasphemy, 100 years ago. Pigs, you can't put pigs in humans, you'll go to hell. So, we need to get the word spread. We need more people to encompass these thoughts that this is a good idea, and that in fact you may think, they may think, well, you just get old and you just die. Well, what is a good date for you to die? You want to put your finger on a calendar? You probably don't, and probably at that point you'll spend 85% of all the money you've ever spent on healthcare trying to survive, and that's what we see statistically. So that's a reality. and that's just trying to eke out a few extra months. Nobody lays down and dies except for extremely depressed people, okay? That it's just not in our mentality. It's not in the human nature. It's not in any creature's blood to do that. So, we need to realize that all of these people sort of are on the same page, and get everyone together and help them find this science, and find that in fact this is here. This isn't science fiction. It's science fact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm in agreement. So look, what are some of the most common objections that you often have to counter, or that you've come up against in the past with regards to what you're doing at Bioviva, the gene therapy, and I guess general attitudes towards that from lay audience?
The first one is usually it's normal to die of aging. And then in my presentation, I always break that down. I say, no, actually, if you want to look at how it's normal to die, it's normal to die before the age of 35 of infectious disease. And we can look at death logs, and we can look at, death logs from 1665, and we can go 100 years forward, 200 years forward, and we're still seeing the similar numbers. People die of infectious disease. We die of aging diseases because of intervention, because of immunizations and antibiotics, okay? That changed everything. So, when they realize that that actually is not the normal way to die, that helps a lot. Then other people, they might say, well, is this something good to do? Would my religion be behind this? I rarely ever get this, even though everyone else says that they do. I rarely hear any problem from the religious end, because many of these religions promised immortality, but they could only promise it through death, right? And then in the Bible, which I'm not versed in, but it says, God says, if you follow my ways, you'll live 800 and some years. And Jesus came to the earth and started curing disease. And these people actually pick up on it quite quick, and they want it. They're like, wow, I've talked to a lot of religious people, and they've been excited about it. But I've heard that there are a lot of questions from religious groups, and I think that it depends on who it comes from. Again, when it comes from me and I'm sitting in front of them, then it's acceptable. But if it comes through some headline, this crap that comes out, trying to disintegrate the use of a good science to save lives, then it scares them. No matter how used to the media machine we get, and how much it distorts things on purpose just to sell a story or to look elite compared to someone else, elitism is just a huge part of it. Then the more that happens, I can't believe that people don't get used to it and just say, oh, well, that's a fantastical headline, why don't I go and find out more? But people just don't have time in the day. So a lot of this media ends up ruling and running our lives and running our fear.
Yeah. So yeah, look, in order to curate the right kind of message you want to get out there, how do you think people should be framing the work which you're doing specifically, and maybe how is it the same with other forms of I guess other forms of science, other forms of medicine? Do you think that Bioviva's message needs to be curated, in a different way than other sort of approaches to getting healthy?
I think that it does. I think that it does a little bit. I think that we need to get people excited. And what we talk a lot about is disease mitigation. And I think that that's what the difference is. And I think that that is a good way to message to the world. So a lot of people can't agree with, things like radical life extension or immortality, or things that people talk about. But one thing that they can agree with is disease mitigation. And so when we talk about what we do, we say that, we are trying to cure the diseases of old age. And you know what? People, when you point out suffering, we're trying to reduce suffering. People get that. They get really excited about that. And that's really our message. And so, when people ask me about the other things, I say, I don't know, but there is one question to ask yourself. If you're healthy, what do you die of?
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. So
Accidents.
if we can, yeah, right. So there is an answer in there, but we don't know what the next step of normal will be once we've intervened, but we know what will happen if we don't intervene.
Mm.
And I think that bioethics is a very, very touchy subject, because the way that ethics are run in the US is a little bit more on bureaucracy, it seems, than real ethics. Just by the creed of "thou shalt not hurt your patient," but your patients are all dying.
Mm. Mm.
So they've been hurt.
It's the precautionary principle taken to the extreme. It's like saying, if you're going to do anything that might have like a non-trivial possibility of hurting someone, then don't do it, even if they want to try it.
Right.
So,
It's like it's just saving oneself from a lawsuit, I guess.
yes.
But what it is it's saying there's a cliff and all those people are headed straight towards the cliff, but if I intervene, I might get in trouble. So let's just let's just keep them on their way. And we need new intervention. We need to come in now. We've got to pioneer the future. We've got to get excited about that. And we have to have our feet firmly placed on the ground. And when we get bad press, we need to stand up and put our chin up and say, I didn't write that. If I wrote that, I would be ashamed of myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks as though you've got some pretty well-recognized scientists on your advisory board. George Church is one of them. A person who I've interviewed a lot, Aubrey de Grey, is there as well. So it's not as if, it's like you're screaming in the wilderness and nobody else is listening. There are some reputable scientists listening who are on board, who are really interested in what Bioviva is doing and are in support of that. So that's really good to hear as well.
Yeah, I'm really happy about that. And, really our board is all pioneering scientists. They are the pioneers. They're the persons who are willing to move forward, and there couldn't be anything better for the world than that. And I'm really happy about that. Now, they were not advised of this test, so they did not know that it was taking place, and I don't think that any of them could have said, "Oh, go ahead and do that." So that's the honest truth, and the reason that we didn't tell them is so that they wouldn't be held liable for anything that we did. I believe that they should be safe from our disruptive behavior, and let us be disruptive. Now we'll have to walk a careful line to keep them.
Yes.
But hopefully we can be innovative while we do that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you have to be disruptive and you have to take risks, I think, in order to move beyond the status quo. And we need to look. These pioneer scientists can't be blamed for having status quo bias, like most of the rest of the world possibly could be looking at themselves and saying, am I biased about the status quo? What's so good about the status quo? Why aren't I giving, interventions like yours a serious look? So yeah, at the same time, they have an academic credibility that they need to maintain as well. And I understand where you're coming from, why you didn't actually inform them beforehand, so that they couldn't be blamed or be culpable.
Right.
If it turned out that something did go wrong, or if it turned out that the media really, really didn't like what you were doing there. So I think it was a wise course of action. Yeah.
And so that everyone knows, I think this might be interesting. We did have everything filmed.
Yes. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So there is a team that's working on that out of LA, and of course, if anyone, we cannot pay them so that it is unbiased. But if anyone wants to come forward and put their money behind a really cool documentary, they could do that. I think that they're going to start pitching it in the next couple weeks in LA, and I hope that they have a raving success, because this will I don't think that anyone has seen anything like that day before.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to seeing that. Yeah, look, it sounds like an awesome documentary, and I'm happy to help support that myself. I've got interview footage I'd be willing to sort of throw that way as well, with people like Aubrey de Grey and various skeptics as well. I've got Michael Shermer, who is a well-known skeptic who's actually in favour of pursuing the therapies related to reducing the suffering and the damage related to old age. So yeah, I was surprised at some of the comments he made about this sort of research. This was quite a while ago, I think in 2012 when I did the interview, but yeah, it still holds true now. So yeah, look, amazing what you're doing. So look, let's talk about like sponsorship. I mean, there's the Max Life Foundation fundraiser that you're doing, and that was launched not too long ago. Is that still going, by the way?
Yeah, the great thing about working with a foundation is that they can actually raise money for you for years, and they will stand by us. They need a little update to the website, and we're going to get them, into the 2000s. Try to get them into the 3000s. They're a fantastic group. They're giving 100% of all the donations to Bioviva, which is almost impossible to find. And the reason that we did this instead of a crowdfunding is because we're so new and so unknown that we didn't really think that we'd do very well that way. We don't really have any super like we're pretty humble people. I mean, we're just we're who we are, whether you like it or not. We're not glamorous, so anyway, I didn't know how much
disagree.
I didn't know how much people would give to a crowdfunder of people that they didn't know. So I went with a foundation because, again, they can raise money for years instead of just a matter of weeks, and they won't take anything for themselves. And that's fantastic. And that is for Alzheimer's. We also want to run another one for sarcopenia. And those would be the 2 gene therapies split apart. Even George Church is pro-telomerase now, which is fantastic. There have always been the camps of for it and against it, and he's looking very for it. And we would like to find out what happens in Alzheimer's patients, because then that expedites these therapies to you, because we can gain safety and efficacy. We want to do everything at an FDA standard, but offshore, so it's less expensive. But we want to start treating patients like yesterday, like 10 months ago, so that we can find out sooner than later.
Yeah, definitely. So do you want to talk more on what it is about like telomerase therapy, how telomerase affects the ends of our cells at telomeres, and what that actually means for people, what sorts of diseases that can help mitigate?
Boy, actually, it's really broad. We don't know how broad it could be. So the telomeres are on the ends of your chromosomes, and as your cells divide, they get shorter and shorter. Sometimes when you have your blood tested, you'll have some longer ones and some shorter ones, and that's because the stem cells have divided and you've got some younger cells intermixed. As they get shorter and shorter, things happen epigenetically. You can kind of think of it like a bed, and let's say there's a bunch of springs in the bed, and let's say the cover around the mattress, the cover on the mattress is the telomeres, and as it gets thin, things start springing out, and once you've got one, you're probably going to have 10. What happens is, as those genes epigenetically turn on, we get things like mutations and cancers. So it's believed that telomerase keeps that chromosome nicely packed and everything together, and sort of cleans up everything that's happening on it. And we think that that might be why the mice in DePino's test actually reversed in aging, both in their brain size, their coat, their skin, their organs. So this actually, if this therapy works that well, this would be a potential cure for a myriad of aging diseases, and not only that, but childhood diseases, things like progeria and other diseases. And so Also AIDS, because AIDS is accelerated aging. It wouldn't necessarily be a cure. There's a great thing coming down the pipeline right now. But what it would be is it would keep the telomeres from the massive attrition, which would lead to people's death. So if you look at the science, you can kind of gauge how much life you have on you by the length of your telomeres. And I believe that it's completely correlated to senescent cells. Now, some people are coming out and saying senescent cells appear to have their own routes, but I think that telomere attrition has a lot to do with it. But I can't argue that because I'm not the scientist and I'm just telling you what I know in layman's terms.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, right. It looks as though if we can at least test, and if you're successful with this sorts of gene therapy, which seems to like increase the length of telomeres on chromosomes in humans, and that will have a knock-on downstream effect of reducing the likelihood of certain diseases like Alzheimer's and others, right?
Yeah, if we can make your cells act young, then they start cleaning up house like they're supposed to do again. And actually, it is quite possible that your mitochondria and everything will reestablish itself when the cell is behaving young and doing what it's supposed to do. So that is the whole background why we would use something like that. So in animal studies, for people who don't know, it did reverse aging. Both visual and, you know, all the systems that you could not see. The animals did go on to die anyway, but it did reverse the aging. And that's why we would use that. When we look at a graph and we look at something like a graph that shows the diseases that we die of, and it shows the age at which this happens. So if this is 0 and this is 65, you really see diseases like, you know, heart disease and Alzheimer's and cancer and nephropathies and stuff. They just start shooting up, and everyone shoots up into this death curve. So what we want to try to do is bring your cells back down to somewhere around here between, you know, 15 and 25, and see if we can, and see if we can make them act young when they were really still cleaning up house. Now it will be interesting to see because, you know, there's new data showing that even Alzheimer's might be able to be detected in people as young as 20. So in that case, you know, what is happening? Do we have to do better than that? And you know what? We won't stop until we figure it out.
No, well, that's fantastic. So, look, we know that like this gene therapy isn't going to stop you from getting run over by a truck, but what kind? I mean, will it? Is this like a potentially indefinite health span we're talking about here? Is it something that will like work when you're 120 or 150 or 200?
So I think maybe you're asking two questions, like when would you get it, or how long would you live?
Well, yes. So if you continued to like have gene therapy that would curate and repair the telomeres on the ends of your chromosomes, making sure that they were okay, the code inside the cells was fine. Would that translate, if you kept on repeating the treatments, would that translate into, I guess, indefinite lifespan? Is what I'm saying. I don't like using the word immortality because, you know,
right. I don't either. Yeah, I don't either. You know what? The thing is, we got to find out. I don't think it would be fair to make an assessment that I know, because we don't know. We don't even know if it works yet. But it's very hopeful, and there's a couple ways to do it. We could do an intermediate treatment, which would actually be probably safer to use, where maybe you just turn on telomerase for a certain period of time and then you turn it back off. Or we can do a permanent upregulation of telomerase, and that is similar to what's happening in your germline, and that's what I took. So there's two ways to do it. There's one gene therapy, and then there's a myriad of them. Both have other benefits for different reasons. And so what you're talking about is if we used one that was transient and then you got another one and another one and another one, well, then it comes down to, will this shore up all of the damage that's happened to the cell? Because if we still have mutations, we're still going to have problems. And we just don't know. We're hopeful that that would happen, but we don't know. And I think that this gene therapy, from what we know now, is the closest thing we have to that hope that you have right now, and that I have, and that everyone has. I haven't seen anything better than this one for that.
Wow, fantastic. Well, it's so amazing I get to interview you at such an early stage in this process. Yeah, very exciting.
You just have to keep coming back every month.
Yay. Well, here's the thing. Like you mentioned, germline gene therapy. There's from my intuition, I would have thought that this sort of therapy would have fallen into the somatic gene therapy department.
I'm sorry. Right. I must have, I think I misspoke, which can happen. So this does not affect your germline, but your germline does have telomerase turned on in it. So what I was saying is that your germline, in order to protect it, those cells have telomerase turned on. So it's not like it's not turned on anywhere in your body. We target somatic cells. We're not targeting the germline. We don't want to affect your offspring at all.
Yeah. So that was just trying to distinguish there. Some people hear the word germline and think, oh, well, it won't work for me. There's no use in me doing this treatment. It'll only work for offspring, and it requires us to go in and start fiddling with, like a really early stage development of like or embryos and such like that. But this is actually going to work for people who are alive today. So it's in the interests of people who want to stay alive, who already recognize that they're alive, and who already sort of value the value life. So
I mean, I think that what we say is the most important currency is time. So how are you going to spend yours if we extend it? And that's one great thing to say to people who might have the money to invest, is that, how much more money can you make if we extend your life even by 15 years, your working life, your healthy, happy life. And for those persons who don't feel, bountiful in the financial sense, it's, that doesn't matter. How do you want to spend your time? Maybe you want to create that wealth. Maybe that's your goal. I would say go live, go hike, go camp. But that's me.
Yeah, me too.
Like, don't be stodgy. Get out there and actually live. But everybody has a different desire. Some people are the money people, some people are the fun people, and some people, I don't know what they're doing. Hopefully they're a bit of both.
Hopefully. Well, I've been trying to have as much fun. I've been doing a bit of camping recently, so I can say, well, yes, I like to take my camera on top of mountains and try and take photos of the stars. That's my recent sort of hobby, which is kind of nice.
Some people have money and they build castles, and I always say the mountains are my castles, and so I can go and use any one of them with a tent anytime I want to.
Absolutely, yeah. So, well, what's now? Yes, there was an AMA, right, and that's when you actually let everybody know. That was the first thing. That was the first time that anybody outside of you and your company knew that you were the very first patient to actually do this. And that was a very interesting forum to let people know what was happening.
Yeah, it was funny because the person who set it up said, oh, you put the wrong title. The title is, we have treated a patient with gene therapy. And I emailed back and I said, no, actually, that's the right title. And what happened is there was some excitement, and there was a press release put out too soon. And we found ourselves being bashed up the rough shore of ethics that, people were saying, contacting and saying, well, how could you do that to a patient? There wasn't enough safety and efficacy behind that. And so I decided to tell the truth and, admit that it was me, and that, put out one flaming fire for the next. But it was really strange. It was really surreal, because it felt like it really wasn't happening, and yet it was. And it actually, you can see in the Reddit how it takes people a while to figure
To
out what I had
register.
just said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was kind of giggling behind the thing, but I was like,
Mm,
oh, you know, because I really didn't want my privacy affected by this. And
mm,
but it kind of had to happen because I didn't really want a wall of questions from the world on ethics and things like that that I think are so twisted, and that we've bought into what ethics are. You know, I would have I would not have treated someone to be the first person that wasn't me. I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that unless they were tragically ill. Then I would
mm.
have.
And they were completely on board with the idea, and it was their choice, and it
Right.
wasn't
Oh yeah,
yours, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that you absolutely have the choice, and you
Like,
should
you
go.
know, prodding people into these laboratories and performing tests on them. We're not breeding people
I
and like putting
know.
them in cages and performing tests on them.
Yeah,
Like,
we
it's
want it to be a human's right. You can take it if you want. You don't have to take it if you
mm,
don't want. But we did have a
yeah.
lot of people contact us and volunteer, and they were like, "I would volunteer. I would volunteer. I
Mm,
would love to do one of these." And we still get that, but it just that wouldn't have been right. Even though we actually personally knew several people who would, it just wouldn't
mm,
have been right. And so it was kind of like a bam, there it is. And it was, like I said, we had
mm,
to watch the people trickle down the information.
mm,
They were often
mm.
asking questions before they knew that was the case. And now all the world is different.
Mhm.
My quiet life isn't so quiet anymore.
Right, yes. I mean, yeah, I can imagine it's going to get quite out there in the future. Are you ready for this? Really, I mean,
Oh, well,
it
I
sounds
don't
like
think that there's any other way to do it. I mean, I think
mm,
that this is just what we have to do. And now we just have to cross our fingers that the therapy took,
mm,
that the genes were good, and that we'll have a good outcome. Because if we don't, I would just be so disappointed.
mm.
I
Well,
would
I
just
mean,
be
it has
sad.
to be tried. It really does. And at the end of the day, it may not even work 100% right, but that's a scientific method. It's great that you're trying this. And well, look, it's been like a couple of weeks, has it, since you've had these therapies?
It's been, what is today? It's been about a month, just under
Oh,
a month.
just under a
So
month, right?
yeah, so we have with the muscle building gene therapy, we know that starts to show around 4 and 5 months, and not
Hmm.
before. So we
Right.
could guess that about the telomerase as well. We could guess that it would happen around 4 or 5 months, maybe
Mm,
6 or 8, because it's a different mechanism of change.
right.
So we know it's going to be a good solid year. So I'll hopefully be talking to you a whole bunch.
Absolutely, yes. So, I mean, we're not expecting you to look like the Incredible Hulk at the end of this, are we?
No, 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 no. I should not. Actually, that same gene therapy is going through, it's in phase 3 clinical trials with children with muscular dystrophy at Nationwide
Mm,
Children's Hospital, and it's going into phase 1. So we feel really comfortable using that off-label for sarcopenia, and that's what we want to start moving forward,
sarcopenia.
to raise money for a clinical trial for people over 60 and treat them for sarcopenia with that, and actually, you know, do a trial that is done as everyone expects, but offshores at less cost, so that we can get the cost of the treatment down. And that one, we feel like we've got the go ahead on. It's
Mm,
the telomerase that's a little bit more promising, all in all, and
mm,
for biological age reversal. And that one is, you know, is kind of got to start from ground one. But no, I should not look like the Incredible Hulk. My own doctor took this gene therapy 5 years ago, and he doesn't. He just looks
oh,
very fit, and he's very healthy. He's got no problems with his blood pressure, anything like that.
mm,
He has no atherosclerotic plaques, which is interesting, and we're trying to find out why that is, if it
mm,
has something to do with the therapy or not. But it looks really good, and
mm,
it feels really good. And he is, you know, even though he has heart disease and high blood pressure on both sides of the family, he's having none of that. And
mm,
so we're hoping that there's a myriad of benefits to the therapy instead of
mm.
just muscle building. But
Amazing.
sarcopenia or frailty kills 6% of the population. So that's 6% of the population that we might
Mm,
be able to save with that gene therapy. And it is
mm.
an aging factor. So it is treating aging as a disease. So we're excited about it. It definitely fits our mission.
Right. So yeah, I mean, like a lot of people don't associate like muscle mass with the effects of old age, and muscular dystrophy or sarcopenia, as you mentioned. I wasn't aware of the sarcopenia stuff, but yeah, do you want to just describe just briefly what it is about loss of muscle mass which causes people to die earlier, or like is associated or correlated with that?
Right. So that's sarcopenia itself, and it's muscle wasting over time. So at about the age, well, everyone argues, but about the age of 30, you start losing about 1% of your muscle over time. Now, some people take things like testosterone or human growth hormone, or they just stay very active,
Mm,
which are great ways to take care of yourself. But there is a certain point where the attrition overrides. You know, definitely when you see people over 60, they have less muscle, and you see them over 70, less, and it's hard to see it's, you know, you're not going to run into a lot of buff 80-year-olds that are not taking something.
mm,
And so this does kill people. This is how people get broken hips and things like that. It's not just a man's disease, it's a women's disease as well. And so we see, you know, often you see old people shuffling along. Well, that's not because they can't, well, some of them it's because they can't go faster, but others of them, they can't go faster because they're really at risk of hurting themselves. They have so little muscle, you know, carrying their bodies, their frail bodies, and that's
mm,
frailty, and it kills 6% of the population.
and that's a large amount of people, really. Yes.
Yeah, it
And I
is.
mean, yeah, if it wasn't like if people actually got to the age, I wonder what the percent of people who actually got to the old age, how much frailty would be then. Because it seems like you're saying 6% of total population, but
Mm.
out of the population, some of those people die early of like accidents or
Oh, right,
diseases unrelated. Is this
right. So
6% of total population or the elderly population?
well, yeah, these are the diseases that we die of in old age. And so sarcopenia certainly would take a lot more people if they didn't die of cancer and heart disease and various things like that. We
Mm,
also, one of the bits of data on the supercentenarians, people who live over 110, is that they
mm,
have more muscle mass than their
mm,
peers.
mm,
So we know that muscle mass is probably better for their bodies, safer for them maybe, and also muscle cells don't tend to get cancer. And
mm.
so maybe there is a correlation there, but I don't know. I really don't know. And so I guess at that point I would have to say that is what I
Mhm, mhm,
know.
mhm, it's better not to overstate your case. Like it's
Yes.
true,
I'm not going
and
to
say
make
the
things up
causes.
now. I'm just going to tell you what I know.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes it's a bit like it's sometimes naturally it's a bit easy to like in conversation to like maybe exaggerate a little there, but like I think that you're doing great in just trying to state what is and everything. Now, also, you're a vegetarian. And
I am.
there's controversy, there's disagreement out there as to what constitutes um, a healthy diet. Now, I think you're in the camp of believing that vegetarianism is actually more healthy than people than consuming meat, or generally. Is that correct?
Well, I think that it depends on how you do a vegetarian diet. There was a great article out recently that talked about the sugars in meat not being able to be broken down by humans and being directly correlated with cancer. But actually, you get those in cow milk as well, and I too tend
Mm,
to eat too much cheese. I think that the fact of the matter is that a restricted diet is really one of the first things that has shown evidence to extend life.
mm,
We don't know definitively in humans, but we're coming closer to that data. And metformin is sort of a drug that mimics something like that. So I think, I don't know too much about this, but I think that what we'll find is the perfect diet is limited on sugar, certainly, probably limited somewhat on salt, and
mm,
is probably for better or for worse, limited on animal products, because there appears to be proteins that we can't break down and that are directly correlated with inflammation and therefore cancer. And I am not an expert in this area. I started a vegetarian diet over 20 years ago for ethical reasons. I didn't like farming. I didn't like what the farming was doing to the planet and to the animals. And then I just didn't eat meat again because I didn't seem to need it. Okay. So I'm learning more and more about diet from Ray Cronise. He's become a fantastic innovator in diet restriction. And I'm real interested in his approach and getting on board with his approach and doing things that we know work now. And exercise, I mean, just, you know, these basic things. When people say, what can I do? Certainly exercise and a good diet are ways to go. You know, and so I'm interested in seeing his results. He's writing a book right now called The Broken Plate, and he's doing some just massively innovative work on human metabolism that I don't think has ever been done. And so I will be interested in seeing that. Now, I don't preach my diet to anyone. Almost everyone I eat with eats meat, and that doesn't bother me. I just never went back to eating it because I didn't need it. But then again, like I said, I'm still getting a lot of animal proteins that, for better or for worse, I don't really know if they're good for me or not.
Excellent. Well, okay, so let's start wrapping up then. I think, like, I've taken a lot of your time. You've got other things to do with your life as well. But it's been wonderful. And what you're doing, I just have to, I can't stop reinforcing that it's amazing. And we need more people who are just willing now out there to have the courage to do something about this problem of old age, the problem of diseases associated with old age. And we shouldn't like demonize old age, because if we're healthy and we're old, then it's not such a bad thing at all, is it? No?
Right. We want to be 140, you know, I want to say I'm 140. That's right. And, you know, I think that things will really switch. Like there'll be a real value, a real economy to people over a certain age. You know, right now we have a lot of bias. We're like, oh, you're over 50. Well, you know, or, oh, you're over 70, or, you know, now you're a health, you know, problem to the whole world, you know. I think that I see a day when people are like, oh, that's awesome, you're 70, you know, and you have so much value, you must have, you know, wisdom and knowledge, and we'll hope that they do.
Absolutely. And we need to give ourselves permission to talk about these sorts of things. It shouldn't be just like always in the realm of taboo and having, you know, don't bring this up at cocktail parties or the dinner table. This is something that affects us all and affects the people who know and love.
We need to talk about it. We need to realize that you, me, everyone on this earth, you know, death is the great equalizer, and how you're going to die, you can decide. So are you going to die by diseases that might be curable? Then you better step aside, because we're not going with that train of thought. We've got a lot of people, and they're not interested in dying the way that we've been told is the normal, natural way to die, and we should just go for it. Nope, we're going to change that.
Absolutely. Well, it's been wonderful having you, and yes, I look forward to talking to you again. And you have
what a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay,
yes, you too. Bye, Liz.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.